Are you ready, Terry?
Yep, we're live.
Okay. Good evening and welcome to this forum for the Jackson County Legislature, sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Kansas City, Jackson, Clay, and Platte counties. I am Cheryl Barnes and I am a member of this league. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization and our membership is open to everyone. We neither screen nor endorse candidates. Our mission is to empower voters and to support our democracy. We envision a democracy where every citizen has the knowledge, the right, the desire, and the confidence to participate. We are here for this voter education event to provide an opportunity to listen as the candidates present their positions. Voters have submitted questions via email at forumquestions@lwvkc.org up to an hour ago. All of the candidates running for the Jackson County Legislature have been invited to participate in our forum tonight. Their term will be 4 years. There are 4 candidates participating in tonight's forum. We welcome and appreciate the following individuals. First District, Manny Abarca and Christina McDonough Hunt, Third District, Charlie Franklin, Fifth District, we didn't hear back from the candidate. Sixth District, Amanda Toomey. I'd like for you all to know the other league members volunteering with me tonight include Elizabeth Dower, our timer, Terry Lane, our Zoom board tech host, and the forum's chair, Anitra Steele. Our legislative forum coordinator is Anitra. This forum will be recorded and available and archived on the league's webpage, lwvkc.org. The candidates will answer each question in a random order that I've already shared with the candidates. Each will have 90 seconds to respond to your questions. Candidates, please answer the question asked and stick to the topic. There will be no rebuttals, but you can go back to an issue during your closing remarks, for which you are allotted 2 minutes. Let's hear from the candidates now. So the first question we have is, how will the county deal with homelessness? And we'll start with Mr. Abarca.
Sure. I think there are many ways the county can address homelessness, and the main way is through the funds that the county governs and oversees, and making sure that my entire family's in the car, so my apologies as we come back from urgent care. But the life that we live, right? So yeah, making sure Combat, the Children's Services Fund, all focus on the different issues that lead to resolution of the homelessness situation. So yeah, this is the best answer I got in the moment of chaos directly behind me.
Mr. McDonough Hunt, how will the county deal with homelessness?
Hi. Well, first of all, thank you for hosting this. It's an honor to be here to present my platform. League of Women Voters is an amazing organization. So thank you. And you know, the thing about homelessness is we have to get down to the root of the issue. So I know Manny mentioned Combat. So there are many programs for the that Combat encompasses, that include drug rehabilitation, psychiatric rehabilitation. There are many different reasons for people that as to why they're homeless. Many have a drug addiction, others, there could be PTSD or some kind of mental illness, and then others, it could be a financial thing. I mean, like I said, there's a wide range, but as far as where the county is concerned, there are programs under Combat that specifically can help with the homelessness. There are organizations that Combat funds, but in addition to that, there's the mental aspect. Combat funds many treatment programs for that, as well as the treatment for drugs. And in addition to that, there's the drugs for the people that are involved, but also their family members. So it goes even further outside of that. And quite simply, looking at how the money is divided up for Combat, there needs to be more funds put towards more of the treatments and community-wide type of programs.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Franklin, how will the county deal with homelessness? You're on mute, Mr. Franklin.
Echoing what both candidates have said, making sure we're funding the mental health facilities, making sure that we're financing combat, and then Community Services League, if there's any of those that they can get into their programs and find homes. That's the main thing the county can do.
Thank you. Ms. Toomey, how will the county deal with homelessness?
Thank you. I will echo what my fellow candidates have said. The most important thing when it comes to dealing with homelessness is to determine those root causes. And at the end of the day, we all know that comes down to poverty. And in particular, over the last 10 to 15 years, it's come down to how resilient is our economy, locally, statewide, federally, in order to ensure that people can get good jobs. There are issues with mental illness, with drug addiction, things like that, but there are also a lot of homeless on our streets because of the poverty that has come from job loss due to economic decline, due to the issues with COVID, and all of these different things. There are a lot of programs that will help us build up the resilience as a community. And it's our responsibility as legislatures to help find those programs, to find the grants, and to ensure that people know those programs are available for their utilization once we have the money and the infrastructure in place for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Toomey, we're going to come right back to you because we're asking these in random order. And this question is, what is your position on moving the Royals to downtown stadium?
Thank you for the question. We get this one a lot, right? It's a very big issue. It's a very big thing to have to think about. The first thing I always like to caution people when I'm speaking on this topic is the teams are privately owned, or they're owned by conglomerations. So there are things that we can recommend. We can do the studies to say, what's the feasibility of it? How do we park people downtown Kansas City? We can look at why are the reasons that we want to change. Is it because of traffic issues? I know that's one of the things I hear. Maybe we can extend the street line out to the current stadium. Maybe that's a better solution. It provides some of that accessibility into the city for people when it's not game day. So we can have more transition of employees for those jobs we just talked about. One of the things that I think is very important for us to remember as we're doing these feasibility studies, as we talk about potentially moving the stadium, is what does that look like for the economy of Independence and the surrounding area where the stadiums are now that currently benefit from that, as well as what does it look like if we move the stadium? Because it's a multi-tiered issue. It's not just how can we economically help downtown, but it's also what does that do to the community in Independence? It will cost them some taxes. It will cost things there. So how do we balance this if that's the decision that the committee that's assigned and tasked to looking at the feasibility determines? Thank you.
Thanks. Ms. McDonough Hunt, moving the Royals downtown. How do you feel about that?
Well, you know, as Amanda said, there's the privately owned portion of it, and then there's the taxpayer portion of it. And I know that the owners, many of them are really pushing for this downtown, stadium. But I guess my big things are exactly like she said, why? What are the reasons? And if that's true, personally, I don't believe that the taxpayers should have to pay for that. We currently pay for the stadiums in Jackson County. And I don't believe that having to rebuild another stadium when we have two beautiful stadiums sitting right there in Kansas City, Missouri, right in the city limits of Kansas City, then, I mean, there's, in my opinion, no reason to spend more of our money when that money could actually be used in other places to better our community and to make our community stronger. I mean, that's what we want to do. And I think if they want to do that, it should be privately funded.
Thank you. Mr. Franklin, moving the Royals downtown, building a new stadium.
Well, I'm personally not in favor of it. I like it very much right where it is. We've got, two very nice stadiums. The lease agreements don't expire until 2031. I would begin with looking at the financial analysis of the new stadium versus the old stadium. Look at the revenue generated, jobs created, does it tax flow? Ask important questions, including what to do with the existing space. Could we use that existing space for anything for the county? What would we lose and what would we gain? And maybe explore other funding opportunities besides the county funding it.
Thank you. Mr. Abarca, moving the Royals downtown.
Yeah, I finally landed at home. Incredibly important question. First of all, I think the voters need to tell us what they believe we need to do with the stadium downtown. Personally, I agree that no additional tax dollars should be spent on building a new stadium. However, if the will of the voters is to build a new stadium, we need to make sure we do it with prevailing wage, utilizing local contractors, MBE, WBE, VBE contractors, to make sure that if we do build a new stadium, it is built with the folks around us and not out-of-state contractors or fly-by-night contractors. So it's going to be determined by the will of the voters, in my opinion.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to another topic. Do you think the county sales tax is appropriate? Should it be higher or lower? Also, would you support dropping the sales tax from feminine menstrual products and diapers? And with that, we will start with Mr. Franklin.
Well, needless to say, anytime we can get any type of taxes down, that's always a good thing. And our taxes are up there pretty high because the voters just keep right on passing thing after thing. It's always real small, so they just pass it. And I don't know of anything that we're supporting that I would be particularly interested in getting rid of. But yeah, at some point we can't get 11, 12, 14% just every time we need 1/8 of a cent here and 1/2 cent there and 1/4 cent there. But right now, I don't specifically know of anything that's on the sales tax that I would be in favor of dropping.
I see. Thank you. Ms. McDonough Hunt.
So the second part of your question, taking the taxes up, the diapers and the female products. I mean, I would be for that, dropping that, largely because, you have to understand, especially with the diapers. I mean, I'm a mom. I have done buying the diaper thing. It is incredibly expensive. We're in an economic hardship right now with the community, the United States, and anything that can help moms. I've been a single mom before. I genuinely get how hard it is to purchase all of these items. So, anything that can help our families, our parents, single parents, to me, I definitely am for that. As far as, hiring the taxes, it's got to be a really good reason to hire the taxes, in my opinion. It has to be something very valid. But again, like Charlie said, the voters, if they want to raise the taxes on something, that's a lot of things do have to go to, or I believe a lot of things do need to go to the voters to decide that. So, again, I'm never really for raising our taxes, but if that's what the people want, then that's what we get. So.
Mr. Abarca.
Yeah, I think Amanda brought on some of the very important issues around poverty and the economic impact of the entire system and its full taxing jurisdiction approach, right? So, you can do the incidental life necessity components, whether that's for males or females or others that have specific needs. But realistically, what I think we need to talk more broadly about is tax reform completely, including incentive reform, because what you're really talking about is you're getting hit at the pocketbook at the grocery store, but you're giving millions upon millions upon millions to corporate interests to build sky rises that most of the time don't even live in our communities. And so I think there's a broader opportunity for tax reform that the county should play a very clear role in that they haven't thus far.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to change topics again. Would you support changing
ma'am.
Yes. Oh, I'm so
Am I allowed
sorry.
to answer that question?
Thank you.
I mean, it's all right if not, but
No, please.
I will just say I do agree with my fellow candidates in terms of answering what for me is the easier part of the question, the second half. I would agree that removing the sales tax on diapers, feminine hygiene products. I'm sure there are a few other things that also make sense in terms of these are your day-to-day. It's just like, looking at taxes on buying groceries. Like there's certain things you really don't have a huge amount of choice in our country right now. As far as the broader tax question, I would tend to agree with Manny. There seems to be an opportunity right now for looking at the broader tax structure. Where is that money coming from? Because there are things that the community cares about. That's why we vote to increase the taxes. That's why I'm here in Lee Summit, and we get an initiative that says, hey, the school wants to have a bond issue. We go, yeah, let's do it. We want schools. We want salt for the roads in the winter. We need these things to keep our communities safe, to ensure that everybody is getting the services that they need. So if we choose to remove taxes from sales tax for some reason, and there's a lot of studies out there, sales tax disproportionately harms the poor because more percentage of their income goes to purchases because it's necessities for them. But we have to balance that with somewhere else. And that's where you bring in the experts, the economists, and you say, okay, how do we balance this? How do we make sure we're in the black at the end of the year? Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for catching that. Okay, now we're going to move on. Would you support financial compensation to persons who are wrongly incarcerated in Jackson County? And with that, we'll start with Mr. Franklin again. You're on mute, sir.
I don't have any real problem with that. If somebody was unfortunate enough to be wrongly incarcerated and they are getting out, I don't have any real problem with giving them some financial compensation. Thank
you. Ms. Toomey?
Thank you. The question that I would ask is, and it's something I would need to speak with experts about because I don't have any personal experience, fortunately, with it, would be what are the things that we can provide that person that are the most beneficial to them? Handing somebody money may not be the most beneficial. It may be more beneficial to provide job training, education opportunities, connect them with somebody to help them get back into the community, depending on how long they were incarcerated. I'm not opposed to having some sort of aid for that person, but without speaking to an expert about, is handing them money the right thing, or are there other things that we can do that will more positively impact them long term? I don't really have a good answer for you. And it may be that it varies depending on, this is somebody who was wrongly incarcerated. It had a very quick turnaround. It's been a month, versus somebody who was incarcerated 30 years ago before we had DNA. And now we go, oh, wow, we have new science, we have new data. This is a person who probably is going to need a lot more help than here's a check, get on with your life. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Abarca?
I mean, the political answer that you're looking for is yes, that's an easy one to answer. The realistic question is, how do we pay for it, and from what budget does it come, right? What services are we willing to cut for this type of situation? Now, I would say that we probably tie these circumstances to the prosecutor's budget, because ultimately somebody would have prosecuted that person if you're talking about it coming from us, right? The multi-layers of judicial governance also would to me make it say that we also need to get money from the state to support these wrongful prosecutions, since it's likely going to be a statutory issue as to why somebody would be incarcerated for that reason. So there's a multi-layered answer there. The easy one is absolutely we need to support folks who are wrongly incarcerated for whatever amount of time, but we should probably also compensate people who are wrongfully removed from the place that we're placing our jail. So there's a lot of opportunity for us to make rights at the county that I hopefully will have the opportunity to do for folks.
Thank you. Ms. McDonough Hunt?
Yeah, it's McDonough Hunt, just so you know.
McDonough, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so yes, I mean, I definitely believe that people who are wrongly incarcerated should be compensated, but that, I mean, it's a deeper question than that, or a deeper answer than that, right? So, you know, I agree with Amanda when she said just handing them cash, you know, it's probably not always the best idea. There's other things to it. So maybe they also need, you know, a financial planner to help them with that. But then there's going to be, you know, the mental aspect of it as well. So, I mean, there's other things that are going to go along with this. And, you know, for those, and again, it also does depend, you know, on how long have they been incarcerated wrongly, you know, was it a week, was it 2 weeks? I mean, you know, there's a different conversation with that. Somebody who's been locked away for 20 years, I mean, that's significant. It's a significant portion of their life that they can never have back. So, you know, they have got to be compensated for that in some way, shape, or form. And, you know, how all that shakes and looks out, I don't know. I know that, you know, the county has a lot of areas where funds have been misappropriated, you know, so, or aren't been using, you know, appropriately. So, you know, we'll figure it out. But at the end of the day, you know, people deserve justice, and they deserve to be taken care of if they have lost a significant amount of their life to wrongful imprisonment.
Thank you. Missouri just changed its laws for voter registration, and people who register voters have to become solicitors and sign a form, and that has to go to the state Secretary of State's office. What can the county do to help encourage voters, to make it easier for voter registration and for voters and voting in general? And Amanda, Ms. Toomey, we'd like to start with you with that one.
Oh, thank you. There are multiple answers to this. I think because Missouri has passed several things over the course of the last few years and over the course of the last 10 years or so regarding voter registration. How do you vote? What does that look like? One of the things that I would say is important is we're very, very fortunate in this country that we can vote. So we need to ensure as many eligible voters are registered as possible and are able to get out to vote safely, to vote securely, all of these things that we all are concerned about. I would say we need to ensure that there are people who can do that registration that are from the county, making sure that we're reaching out to those people. Some of them are a little easier than others, right? We can go into high schools fairly easily and ensure that every 18-year-old is getting registered. We can go into retirement communities where people are not as mobile and make sure everybody's registered. Along with that, we can make sure we're providing them with the appropriate IDs, with the appropriate information on how to vote. How do you even make sure that that happens? In terms of things like community volunteers helping set up the vote, we can ensure that they know the new laws. That way there are no concerns with doing it improperly by accident, and that the training and how to do that is readily available and easily accessible to anybody who does want to volunteer. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McDonough Hunt, how is Jackson County going to make it easier for people to vote?
You know, education is the #1 key to this. You know, if someone's not registered, because I've been knocking on doors, I've been talking with people, and even those who aren't registered to vote, and I've asked, you know, why aren't you registered to vote? Oh, well, I feel like my vote doesn't count anyway, or I don't know, it just seems like a lot of work. I don't know how to do it, that kind of a thing. And I've loved, you know, having that conversation with them and getting that message to them about how to do it. You know, go onto the website, you can do this. But even those who don't have access to websites, you know, we can go to the community centers from around the city and have little mini clinics and, you know, invite people. Hey, if you haven't been registered, please come down. You know, we want to educate you. Or even it's a little forum where we say, you know, this is how you do it. We can register you tonight. This is why it's important that you vote so your voice can be heard. Again, it comes down to an educational thing. And if we think it's, you know, we can't get them to Kansas City, you know, the the voters board to get to get their registration or done, then we go to them. I mean, it's not really a hard situation here. It's not a hard answer to this question. We bring it to them, and we educate them is what it comes down to.
Thank you. Mr. Franklin? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. As everybody else has said, the main thing is education, making it as easy as we can to make everybody do everything. Anytime we get a chance, the state mainly determines the rules on how hard it is to get to vote and all that. Anytime we get a chance, we need to speak out to make anybody that wants to vote not have any reasons that they think they shouldn't vote, and just get as many people to vote as we can.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Abarca?
Yeah, so I don't think it's as simple as education. I think it's a value proposition between partisan politics, unfortunately. The Republican Party is making it as hard as possible to vote, particularly in inner city, urban communities where Democrats show up. And the reality of the state of Missouri taking on more proactive ways to kick people off voter rolls, to make it harder for folks like the League of Women Voters to register folks without becoming a solicitor, which is not what you're doing, by the way. It is a partisan issue. And so we need to determine on the value set, do we believe in folks who would like a system that would allow folks to freely register others to vote? Or do we want to support a party who wants to make it more restrictive so that folks, particularly Democrats and people of color, do not vote? Because that's what's happened in Georgia. That's what's happening in Missouri. And you can shake your head, Ms. McDonough, but that is the reality. I'm a party to a lawsuit because the reality of folks helping others at polls has become a partisan issue, and the Republican Party is against people voting.
Thank you. Would you support conflict resolution training in schools? And we're going to start with Ms. McDonough on that one. Conflict resolution in schools.
Yes, I do. Conflict resolution is a huge deal. As we see violence, crime and violence, all of that is rising in our community. And I've been noticing as I'm reading these articles that the ages are getting younger and younger and younger of these kids being involved in these crimes. And, conflict resolution, learning how to diffuse the situation, learning how to talk things out. I feel our community, our society has lost that over these past few decades, and it's a tragedy. And I think it's something that I know I teach this to my kids. And I believe that, if parents aren't teaching it, then, it should also be in the schools. There should be a backup for this because it is important and it's vital for the success of moving forward of our community.
Thank you. Ms. Toomey? Conflict resolution in school?
Well, I would be curious exactly how big the person who asked the question considers conflict resolution, because I think we can all agree the answer to this question is yes. Everybody should be learning conflict resolution, whether it's children in schools or adults in the workplace or just out amongst your community. For a long time, I've had conversations with friends, family, people in the education arena. I was a public school teacher for 3 years. How do we get people to understand civility and civics and your responsibility as a citizen of this country? And part of that is conflict resolution. Part of it's understanding the context of who you're talking to, what's going on. How do you handle a world that feels like it's on fire and a world that feels like it's chaos, which goes bigger than simply, okay, well, we need to talk it out. I think a lot of schools, especially preschools, elementary schools, do try to teach this idea of, okay, you have to apologize, you have to share your toys. We still teach that. But it's bigger than that when you live in a world that's no longer just your elementary school. And you live in a world that's no longer just your high school, because we're so interconnected and there's so much else going on that, yes, I would certainly teach conflict resolution, but I think we should also be teaching our children, here's how you absorb this bigger context without it being overwhelming to the point where you feel like you have to lash out in the first place or where you have to take it from somebody else. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Abarca, conflict resolution?
Yeah, so not only do I support it, I've funded it as a school board member to the tune of some hundreds of thousands of dollars because it's something that is definitely needed. However, to Amanda's point, it is very hard to teach conflict resolution to a group of children when you have leaders that are out there being bullies publicly on TV, when you have insurrections storming the Capitol. That's not conflict resolution. That's not civility. So the reality is, again, back to values. You have to make sure that we're teaching folks the values and then also electing people who will instill those same values to the populace and masses and show them that these are the examples of folks that you want to see in these elected offices. There's also a component here that I think we haven't talked about, and it's the privilege component, right? Those who are afflicted with poverty sometimes have no other mechanisms to react because of the trauma that they've been exposed to and been put onto. And so we need to also address, again, poverty, those underlying issues that get you to that mental state of reacting in that specific way. So there's a lot more there than just funding the Center for Conflict Resolution. It goes well beyond that, and it's something that I've been proud to do at the Kansas City Public Schools.
Thank you. Mr. Franklin?
Yeah, I generally try and stay out of stuff that I don't think the county will ever be involved in, but I would certainly support teaching conflict resolution in the schools.
Thank you. Well, let's follow up with what do you think about teachers carrying guns? And we'll start with you, Mr. Franklin.
At this point in time, I'm not in favor of the teachers carrying guns. I certainly realize the problem that's involved there. I would much rather try and keep schools safe and everything without the teachers actually getting involved in carrying the guns. The future may come up with a little bit different results, but right now I would not support that.
Thank you. Ms. McDonough, teachers carrying guns?
Well, personally, I believe that every single school, whether private or public, should have a resource officer that is carrying on site all the time, as well as long as school is in. So for me, I believe that that's where we start. That's where the conversation gets going. And, you know, as far as the teachers, I mean, you know, if that were something down the line that it moved into, obviously there would need to be massive training. I don't think that every teacher that should even be an option for every teacher. Not everyone can handle that kind of a thing. But the truth is, I mean, we've got to get resource officers to protect our kids in every single school. And again, it doesn't matter if it's a public school or a private school. Our children are all valued and they're all important and they all need to be protected.
Thank you. Ms. Toomey, teachers carry guns?
This is, again, a really complex issue. I will say I tend to agree with Ms. McDonough. Not every teacher, if we make that mandatory, will bother to stay a teacher if we do. I can tell you, as a teacher, I had no business carrying a gun. I can tell you, if I would have been armed in a situation and I have to look at a kid that I know and shoot them, all you would have been doing is giving that kid another gun. I guarantee it, because I never would have been able to pull the trigger. It wouldn't have happened. That said, there are many, many possibilities of how we can improve our communities so that the violence goes down, how we can do preventative measures, how we can have other safety procedures in place. Things like resource officers are certainly one of them, but there's a whole plethora of different things that we can do to help make our schools safer for our students. If we want options for the teachers in the classroom, we can look into those. There are a lot of other things that we can provide to teachers that aren't lethal force, that aren't guns, that can also slow down or potentially stop an active shooter situation. Again, it's so complex. It's so many different people. But me as a teacher, I would have much preferred other options and other training to protect my students rather than have to actually fight as though I'm a combatant in that situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Abarca, teachers carry guns?
Absolutely, definitively no. The reality is we're dancing around the actual root cause issue here. We need to create common sense reforms for why there are so many guns in our society and why the solution is more guns, because that is indefensible for us as the greatest country in the world to say that we cannot do the basic thing and protect kids. Unfortunately, school resource officers don't always do it, right? You've already showed us that. The reality is we need to reform how we have provided guns to literally anyone and everyone in this state who wants one, and made it so affordable to get a gun that anyone can aimlessly shoot and get a gun at whim. We are a victim to gun violence at least 3 or 4 times a week, whether that's the random shooting that occurs, usually high capacity magazines in our backyard, or it's the gunshots that impact different situations across our neighborhood. Unfortunately, we see it all the time. My daughter goes to school and now knows how to respond to an active shooter drill. This was first introduced when I think I was in college and Virginia Tech was just off the cuffs, and it hadn't happened since Columbine, right? So we need to quickly reform how guns get exposed to everyone. That's it. Gun reform. We need to do common sense gun reform now. 10 years ago is when we needed to do it.
Thank you. How much influence do you think the Jackson County Legislature has with the state legislature? You know, how effective do you think the Jackson County Legislature can be at changing state laws? Whichever one you were concerned about. And we'll start with you, Ms. Toomey.
I think it really depends on exactly what law that you're looking at changing. Our legislature has shown that they are willing to do what they want, even against the will of the voters, by passing new laws that override our initiatives. Now, sometimes there are times when you kind of look at it and you go, yeah, that's probably a good idea. But we live in a state that allows initiatives, and when the legislature is saying, hey, we'll go over that, I'm not sure on certain issues if the legislature does have the ability to have an impact. That said, there are many, many more issues where I do think that our legislature is listening to the people at the county levels, at the city levels, at all these lower levels, because they do want to know what their constituents are actively interested in. If we as Jackson County legislature say, hey, things are changing, we know the state got this federal funding for infrastructure, this is what Kansas City needs, help us out here, I think we can have a huge impact on that. Things that are directly related to the county, those laws, those grants, that kind of thing, I think we can have a huge impact on. And as a county legislator, that's what I would be focused on, is the things that the legislature can actually have an impact on. But what we need are those resources from the state to flow down to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McDonough Hunt?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Okay, I agree with Amanda. I mean, it's just going to depend on what we're talking about. We are going to have an influence as a county for specific things. We're Jackson County, we're a very large county, one of the largest in the state. So, there is influence there, but it is going to depend on the topic that we're talking about, infrastructure, some money's coming down for things like, mental health and for persons with disability. I'm a huge advocate and a huge voice in Kansas City for persons with special abilities. And, we could get more funding for that. And I believe that we do have a voice for those types of issues and those types of funding opportunities.
Thank you. Mr. Franklin?
Yeah, as both previous candidates have said, it depends on what you're talking about. There's some things over which we have almost no influence. And then there's other things which we have lobbyists, and we have a couple of experienced county legislators that can go down and actually make an impact. And as far as getting grant money and other types of monies, we can have quite an influence.
Thank you. Mr. Abarca?
The answer is absolutely. On any topics that the constituents of the county or the legislature decide that we set as priority. And I think that's probably the broader opportunity for the legislature is I am unclear as to what the county legislators' state or federal priorities are at this point. And I'm guessing that the general public is equally at a loss as to what those are. Those are significant opportunities to define what priorities we want to address. Property tax reform would be a great one. Not eliminating property tax reform, but allowing the local jurisdictions more opportunity to have direct constituent impact, right? So if we wanted to create a payment program, the county could. If we wanted to create some type of deferred payment system, we could. These are all state statutes that unfortunately don't allow the county much wiggle room to impact your individual property tax now. But again, we have to weigh into that, right? County Executive Frank White sent a letter to the governor saying this is an opportunity to address during a special session. And the governor responded. No, they didn't accomplish anything, but that's not untrue of the state legislature, unfortunately. But we have to be in the game and play that in order to have an impact. The great example that I would give you is Kansas City Public Schools. They would say, look at the lowly Kansas City Public Schools at the time, unaccredited, now fully accredited. But how could they impact a supermajority Republican legislature? We passed equity funding. So it is possible. We just have to be persistent and present.
Thank you. Picking up on that, would you support Kansas City Police control under local control? The Kansas City Police Department under local control? How do you feel about that? And Mr. Franklin, we'll start with you. Oh, you're on mute, sir.
Yeah, I would support that, but I don't live in Kansas City and the county doesn't have anything to do with that really. And so, yeah, I would probably stay out of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McDonough Hunt?
Yeah, I mean, that's a county issue, so it's not really any have influence in. So, I mean, sorry, it's a city issue, so it's not something the county would have influence in. So
I see. So the county would not be supporting with their lobbyists. They wouldn't necessarily send them down there to talk to the legislators about.
So if it's being controlled by, Kansas City, I mean, Jackson County itself, the county legislature does not necessarily have a lot in the county or the city issue. So the city council, they make their decisions, they do a lot. They don't go and, ask Jackson County legislatures their opinions and all of that. So.
Thank you. Ms. Toomey?
Thank you. As with Mr. Franklin, that is outside of my district. From a theoretical standpoint, I would presume that having some level of local control is beneficial, but I also know from the historical context, there are often reasons why things are structured the way that they are. And before I made any recommendations as a legislator, as a legislator, as far as petitioning the state legislature or helping out in some other way, I would want to know what that context is. When was it set up? What does it look like? Why are things the way they are? And what does any future proposal look like, not only on the surface, but what are the ripple effects that making that shift would have? And at this time, I simply don't have a broad enough context to make a definitive answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Abarca?
Kansas City is the only municipal government that doesn't have local control of its police department. The second was St. Louis, and it was because of corruption. And unfortunately, it is now because of Republican corruption that it maintains the way that it currently is. We should absolutely have full control. District 1 in district is completely in Kansas City. We should absolutely have an opinion on that. The reality is that we need to gain local control back, create a committee to focus on the duplications that are obviously going to have to be eliminated when you conjoin those entities, and make sure that folks who would otherwise be displaced from that don't lose a position and can maintain a job. And similarly, the pension programs is another issue that I know FOP oftentimes invokes when we talk about this issue. Those things can be easily worked out. It's been worked out in St. Louis, and we've moved on. And that local control is something that is necessary for the city to effectively run its police department. Republicans unfortunately responded to the mayor of Kansas City by putting it on a ballot initiative, so that you are voting on an issue as a constituent on that in November. But there's a broader issue that is directly under the county that we can have influence on. And it's the fact that the lowest paid employees work for our sheriff right now. That is something that we can fund, that we should focus on as a priority for us. And that is something that I look forward to taking on to make sure our dispatchers and other folks in the sheriff's office make above $15 an hour.
Thank you. Well, let's stay on the topic of civic safety, and I'd like your opinions on why isn't Kansas City and Jackson County working together on building the new jail? And we'll start with you, Ms. McDonough.
Why they are not working together?
Yes.
I mean, I'm not currently on the legislature. I don't know why they're not working together. I mean, I can't answer that. I don't know why they're not working together. So, I mean, I can make assumptions, but at the end of the day, I know that city council members tend to do what they want to do. Jackson County tends to do what they want to do. Do I believe there should be more cohesion? 100%. I totally believe that. I mean, I see, and I also believe the sheriff, you know, Jackson County Sheriff has jurisdiction in Kansas City. You know, we've got a shortage of Kansas City police officers, for example. And I mean, at one point, our police officers were having to drive to Warrensburg to put people in, house them there, and then come pick them back up. I mean, you know, that's not okay. There certainly should be more cohesion. I 100% agree with that.
Thank you. Mr. Franklin?
Yeah, that's something that everybody's wondering about. It just seems like there's too many personalities, that the sheriff can't get together with the police chief, with the city council, with the county executive. Hopefully one of these days, everybody will work together on the same page.
Thank you. Ms. Toomey?
I tend to agree with my fellows here. I think there is a lack of transparency about exactly what's going on and why there isn't more cohesion. I do know from previous forums I've been in and from some of the news I've looked at that some of it does come down to the personalities and the many cooks in the kitchen. It seems to me that there is some tension going on between the city and the county about where the new jail is being built. Should it, shouldn't it, who should be doing it, this sort of thing. This is the role of our elected officials, to compromise, to come together, work these things out, figure these things out. I wish they were doing a better job of it so we weren't having to be asked this question. Certainly, as a legislator, what I would want to do is spend the time to go reach out, find the bonds that we can do to make sure that this is a project that the city, the county, we can be proud of when it's done and not feel like we cut corners, not feel like people had voices that were completely ignored, you know, not feel like one strong voice went out there and said, this is the way it's going to be done. And others were like, well, I don't really want to argue with you. So I would love to see more transparency from our current elected officials and everybody involved. And there we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Abarca?
Pride is what sets us apart from progress. There absolutely has to be a commission amongst all the different levels, right? Because you even have an opportunity for federal involvement here from a funding standpoint. I have had the privilege of working for an amazing former mayor, former councilman, and now Congressman Manuel for the last 8 years. And he taught me that bringing people to the table is what gets stuff done. and setting your egos aside and focusing on the work for the constituents it should be paramount to the work that you're doing. And so that is where I'd start. I already have relationships with many of the council members, with the mayor and others, and creating the space and the pause in the process where we're at now to ensure that they can be included so that we don't have to duplicate the impact that we're going to have on this community, right? Building a justice center is something we have to be very strategic about and very poised and balanced to not just make it about cells, but also about the services that help folks transition back into the community. It is extremely paramount that we include the city in any way possible. And I'm willing to step my pride aside to figure that out because it's that important to me.
Thank you. We're coming to the end of our time together. And so I'd like for you to wrap up with a 2-minute explanation of why we should vote for you and anything else you would like to respond to that you think we didn't get to that you think you feel is important. And we'll start as we did earlier with Mr. Abarca.
Sure. Well, let me first start by answering the first question that I think my child and French fries interrupted. When we deal with the challenges of homelessness, what everyone said was very important. When I served on the board for Rediscover, I learned very quickly that mental health services are not as vast as they need to be. When I was a neighborhood association president, I understand that there are different opinions as to the humanity we should handle homelessness with, but also the veracity to solve the challenges, because a man yielding a machete around to protect himself or harboring guns and shooting each other in tent cities is not something that anyone wants in their community. So we have to be balanced about that approach and utilizing our funds from the mental health fund, mental health levy, children's services fund, all of these different mechanisms to create 5-year plans, at least 5-year plans to get us to where we're going. We have a lot of social services in very small conjoined areas, but that's not spread across the entire Jackson County metropolitan region to truly affect homelessness the way that it should. So I'll pause there and go back to why I think you should vote for me. I carry the values of this district and understanding and knowledge of the governance structure to be an effective leader here. Partisan politics aside, the reality is I want to be there for progressive leadership and guidance with the balance of humanity and our policymaking decisions, but also the reality that we should be a progressive legislature, especially from District 1. Where we reside. We should be focused on issues of the city as well as the federal government and the state, all in alignment to focus and drive forward for our constituents. I have the experience and understanding to do that. My philanthropic background also allows me some understanding of the funding mechanisms that we do as a county. We collect and distribute taxes. It is imperative that your values align with the person that you elect to make sure those things are done correctly.
Thank you. Ms. McDonough, your closing statement, 2 minutes.
Sure, definitely. So here's the thing. Now the biggest things that we're fighting or dealing with is going to be our property assessments and taxes. There's a lot of information that we're finding out now about what's happening with that. People are losing their homes. In 1 year, from 2021 to 2022, fleeing properties tripled, okay? Homes. What's about to happen with the new company that was hired with Tyler, we found that our property taxes this next year could increase up to 40-45% and could be even more than that. There are going to be so many people that lose their homes because it's going to affect mainly our seniors, those on fixed income, and the low income areas. Okay, this is a really big deal. In addition to that, crime. We are fighting a huge uphill battle with crime. And the fact of the matter is that fentanyl is on the rise. There's a new fentanyl that has come out called carfentanil. It is killing our teenagers. I mean, 300 people a day are being killed by fentanyl. Y'all, this is a big deal and it's in our county and we've got to do something to combat this. A vote for me is a vote for your voice. I work for the people. I am talking with the people. I want to represent the people. I didn't accept endorsements from any special interests because I don't work for special interests. I work for the people. That is who I want to represent. And that is what I'm going to do. So a vote for me is a vote for you.
Thank you. Mr. Franklin?
First of all, I'm a lifetime resident of the 3rd District. My opponent, not so much. I'm a CPA, an attorney, a financial planner. I've been chairman of the Jackson County Legislature now for a year. I've got 4 years experience on the legislature. I have been chairman of the Finance and Audit Committee. I've been on the Budget Committee. I spent 30 years working with the Board of Equalization in various capacities, including the chairman. And I think this gives me the experience to lead us again. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Toomey?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to be here tonight. I am a passionate believer that the role of elected officials is to help service the people of the district where they're elected. In this case, Jackson County, Missouri. I'm a pragmatist. I want to look for data-driven solutions to the problems that we have. As my fellow candidates have said, as we've seen through these questions, there are many, many challenges that Jackson County is facing right now, from poverty and crime and drug use, dangers in our schools, concerns about the quality of our schools. All of these different things are things that we can and must solve in the upcoming years. My goal as a county legislature will be to work with everybody in the legislature, regardless of the letter next to their name on this ballot, to say, how can we make our community better for the people living in the community? My education, my career background is very broad. And what that allows me to do is to talk to people from a wide variety of different backgrounds, different careers, from blue collar people working in HVAC to educators to farmers to higher ed, whatever that may be, healthcare workers. I've worked with them. I've talked to them. I understand when you voice your concerns to me. And when I don't, I'm willing to admit that. And I'm willing to say, hey, step it back for me a minute. You just told me something that I wasn't familiar with. I didn't even know it was a problem. Explain it to me. How does this impact your everyday life? And what do you perceive that we can do? I can take those questions, those concerns back to the legislature. We can figure it out. The data is out there. We have the ability to do this in a way that will help our community, improve lives, and to do so on budget and on time. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank all of you candidates for your willingness to participate in this forum. Remember, a recording of this forum will be available soon on the League website, lwvkc.org. Audience, please take time to share the insight you've gained tonight with your family and friends, and be sure to get out to the polls and vote on Tuesday, November 8th. Also, the last day to register to vote or change your registration if you've moved or changed your name is October 12th. So please check your voter registration and update it. And beginning now, you'll need a photo ID to vote. So thank you very much again, and good night.